Welcome to Geeks and Jocks, a podcast that focuses on video games, film, television, and sports. And now, for the person who is in charge of this podcast, here is Ryan Sullivan.
Hello and welcome back to Geeks and Jocks. This is Ryan Sullivan, and the point of this podcast is to talk about film, television, video games, and sports, and whatever is on my mind. And here is episode 3, and we're going to begin this with one of the unfortunate passings from a few weeks ago, and that is the death of Paul Allen, who, for those wondering, he was a co-founder of Microsoft in 1975, along with Bill Gates. And while they were pushing towards that computer route, Allen was interested in sports, from the way it sounds like. And it all began 30 years ago when he purchased the Portland Trail Blazers in 1988. Although the team had been doing well for a good 5-6 years, by the time Allen had a few years of ownership, the team was in the finals. They were very good during that time period, and unfortunately they would lose the first one in 1990 to the bad boys of Detroit with the Pistons, and losing the second one when they went back in 1992 to the Chicago Bulls. Some pretty good company of champions that they had to face. You know, when you consider Detroit, Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, Joe Dumars, and of course for Chicago, Michael Jordan, Pippen, Bill Cartwright, John Paxson. Pretty good groups. But Allen went through a lot of success early on in his tenure as owner of the Trailblazers, and some of the moves they made is why they got into the finals those 2 years. And they experienced decline in the 2000s, and they've kind of back on the declining slide now. But for the most part, I would say the ownership has been was pretty successful, if you want my opinion on it. But with that in mind, I don't think the Portland Trailblazers will be the thing he'll be remembered for. What he'll be remembered for is because he was a guy that grew up in Seattle, Washington. He was the guy that pretty much saved professional football and saved the Seahawks for good. And they're a reason why they're still around today. And part of it is because of Allen. So let's get to the story on how he purchased the team in 1997. So a quick synopsis on the Seahawks during that time period before he bought the team. They started off in 76. They weren't really great at all. They got better, and then the 80s struggled a bit, and then when Chuck Knox took over, they had a pretty good run during his entire coaching tenure there. And they went through a declining years and all that, with a 2-14 year in 1992. They were getting a little better every year, but they were still not a team to be reckoned with, and they at times had good defenses. They were able to run the ball at times. Their quarterback situation could have been better, but when you have a bust like Rick Meyer, huge bust. But anyway, it wasn't just the play that was concerning. There was also concerns about the Kingdom, which, from what I read at the time of the mid-90s, it was crumbling, and both the Seahawks and baseball with the Mariners, they didn't feel like they were getting big enough revenues to still be a successful franchise regardless of records. And reading more into it after his passing, they had this thing going on about potentially the owner, Ken Behring, moving the team to California and moving them to Los Angeles, which at the time, around 1995-96, the Raiders went back to Oakland, and the Rams moved to St. Louis. First time there had been St. Louis football in like 7-8 years. And he was planning to, because at the time the teams, it was common to see teams threaten to move to other places, and You saw it with hockey a bit with like 4 or 5 teams. You had the Quebec Nordiques, who went to Colorado. Minnesota North Stars were the Dallas Stars. Hartford Whalers became Carolina Hurricanes, and the Winnipeg Jets became the Phoenix Coyotes. And with football, following that '95 season, the Cleveland Browns moved to Baltimore, and there wouldn't be a team in Cleveland until '99. You know how much of a joke that franchise is now. Unbelievable. But in a move, the county, King County, blocked the move, and so they scrambled. They scrambled to find an owner, and they were looking, and they were looking, and one of their interests came to Paul Allen, and with Allen, he was willing to do it, but only if the people wanted him to. And looking at the results, he barely just won to own the team. I think it was like 51.4%. It was just over 1% more saying yes, keep the team in Seattle. And this was around the time where the Mariners were starting to have their name in for good teams that could make the playoffs, and it showed during the '95 season. They would get in I believe '97 and 2000 and 2001, and there was interest. And if the fans were interested in that, then the fans would be interested in the Seahawks still. And with that, there were some proposals like a new stadium, which would eventually be CenturyLink Field, and with Allen, he was wise to have certain general managers and to pick the right players for drafts and have the right coach, the ideal coaches. And with that, I mean, you see it when he had Mike Holmgren brought in to coach the team in 1999, a successful coach for Green Bay. He had a pretty good sized run there for the Seahawks, which culminated in their first ever Super Bowl appearance. Obviously, it was into Pittsburgh in 2005, but still, to be able to have that and have these guys like Matt Hasselbeck, Sean Alexander, I mean, some of the best running games were from Seattle during that decade. But you look at this past decade, you know, Pete Carroll having to make the trade on getting Marshawn Lynch, which paid off in the long run, drafting a number of defensive players, a third-round pick in Russell Wilson in 2012. I mean, they know what to pick. They knew, and the results are pretty much through the roof. I mean, it's probably some of the best football that the city has ever seen, probably eclipsing what was seen in the 80s under Chuck Knox. And with that, I mean, with Allen, you know, leaving behind a legacy of lots of remembered players, 3 Super Bowl appearances and winning 1 for the city in 2013. I mean, it says a lot to a guy that grew up in that town and was able to keep a professional team in there. And with that, I mean, the guy should be remembered not just as a Microsoft innovator, but for being one of the great Seattle people in general. And more than likely, he'll be in the Ring of Honor if he hasn't been put in already. So, with that in mind, let's get into the baseball spectrum. And with that, with another unfortunate side for a team, the Los Angeles Dodgers, it'll be 30 years altogether since winning a World Series, and with their loss not too long ago to the Boston Red Sox, they lost to them again in the series, which was actually the first time since 1916 when they were the Brooklyn Dodgers. And remember that, 1916, Boston had Babe Ruth as their pitcher. And I think what helped Boston for this 2018 season is the fact that, you know, some of their acquisitions, when you think of J.D. Martinez, basically this hard-hitting, home run bashing guy, and you got the pitching staff for the team, which consists of Rick Porcello, Chris Sale, David Price, and maybe 1 or 2 others, and maybe a questionable bullpen at times, but they were able to climb their way up. And this was a tough American League this year when you have 3 100-win teams. And I think it's going to be a competitive year next year as well for a number of teams. And I think you'll be able to see some steep competition from Boston, the New York Yankees, the Houston Astros, maybe one or two others that could sneak in, like, say, Tampa Bay. They actually had a pretty good year themselves and actually had over 500 this year, over 85 wins for the year as well. I mean, it says a lot for teams that are looking to sneak in possibly. But you also have the National League side, and as far as Los Angeles goes, I mean, they got a number of young guys and some veterans. I think one of the big questions now will be how will they handle Clayton Kershaw, their star ace. I don't know what you can do. Either keep him on and make sure he stays with them for the rest of his career, or he goes somewhere else. But someone tells me he's going to be chasing some money. I don't know, but we'll have to see what happens. But it's going to be a lot more steeper when you consider Arizona and Colorado have been some pretty strong years altogether. When you consider some of those hitters for Colorado, like Charlie Blackmon, Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, I mean, there's a good group there. And, Arizona, when you consider some of their pitching, which can be questionable at times as well, and some of the guys like Goldschmidt, I mean, there's a reason why the NL West is becoming a little more dangerous. And even like the NL East, Atlanta was a big hit this year. Philly, actually, until the last month or two, I mean, they were a good team as well. I mean, it could be anyone's division in the East, and I'd say even the Central for the National League. I mean, with the way Milwaukee played this year, I mean, to be able to beat the Cubs and win that division, I mean, it just boggles my mind, that anybody can win in that division. I mean, or even the National League overall. I mean, 2019 will be intriguing as well with that. So let's move on to the TV side and talk about something that I don't know what's going on, but regardless, it's going to be some news for a while, but it's regards The Simpsons. Now, for the most part, I would say most Simpson controversy mainly stayed in the 90s. Maybe there's an episode or two here and there that caused some controversy, like there was the Australia episode from 95. There was an episode in Brazil that I think was hated a lot, maybe banned from television, I'm not sure. Yeah, that episode was around like 2002, 2003. But anyway, the thing with The Simpsons controversy in the last year or so has been the character Apu. And for those wondering who he is an Indian character played by Hank Azaria, and the character owns the Quickie Mart in Springfield. And that is where the subject matter comes from with this Indian, real-life Indian, Hari Kondabalu, who did a documentary, The Problem with Apu, which centered around, I guess the stereotypes of Apu and the people and maybe celebrities that are Indian getting mocked for it, I guess back then, bullied over that. I'm not watching it, nor will I intend to, but it just seems very stupid. I mean, at face value, yeah, I mean, you see just a Quickie Mart owner, but anyone that's seen the show and seen the major Apu episodes will know that this is one of the non-Simpson family members to get a lot of development time and a lot of episodes. I would say between him and Ned Flanders, they are probably the most developed, Springfield citizens of the show. I mean, when you consider that, he would get his citizenship, get married, 8 kids, and I believe have an affair, and just a few other things. I mean, that's, to me, that is what makes him such a great character. He's more than just a Quickie Mart owner. He's more than just being an Indian. And it's sad that there has to be controversy over this. Now, I think they're trying, I don't know what's going on, but I think from what I read, they were trying to kill off Apu, I think, but I read a headline with one of the producers saying that's a load of crap. basically saying it's a load of crap in a way, because the claim was from some Indian that wanted to like create a script or something where they can get rid of Apu, I guess, and the producer Al Jean pretty much criticized the move and saying he's not a producer of the show or anything. And it's pretty easy for people to basically say on Twitter something that could be true, but it's a lie. But I don't know. It's hard to tell. It really is. But I don't think this controversy is going to die off anytime soon. I really don't think so. And until either the writers stand up to Kondabalu and all these other guys that might be criticizing them, or they kill off Apu entirely, I mean, it's going to keep going and going and going until people get sick of hearing about it. That's all I have to really say on that, you know. But let's go into the movies. So, with this past few weekends, and really I think there's a huge renaissance now of new and potentially maybe even revived horror movie franchises that are coming around all together. And the success lately has been through Universal's Halloween 2018 movie, which has been doing very well at the box office. And on a $10 million budget, mind you, it has made probably just over $130 million at the time of this recording. So it says a lot for people that are deeply interested in horror movies, because this is one of the originals. The original Halloween came out in late 1978 and is one of the great pioneers of movies, because you got the unkillable bad guy in Michael Myers. You have scenarios where, it's like he will stalk, he will go after the people that he wants to kill. But in the end, it's just normal people trying to save the day and make sure that he stays in a mental institution forever. And I don't know what else really to say, but it spawned tons of imitators when you consider stuff like, say, the Friday the 13th movies, Nightmare on Elm Street, and a bunch of other movies during that time period. But I think what hurts that area of the 80s is the oversaturation of these movies. It seemed like just about a ton of these movies were coming out every year, and the quality, for the most part, most people were not kind to the Friday the 13th movies. And I don't even think the first one was even liked either. I think liked well enough, but the franchise, for the most part, I don't know, unless it's like horror fans, most people are not kind to these movies. Now, Nightmare on Elm Street, I believe, has a lot more love compared to other horror movie franchises, because it does it in a unique manner, and they're able to, from what I think I can understand, make them stand out more and have a unique approach to what Freddy Krueger can do, despite being the same concept: invade dreams, kill the people dreaming, yada yada yada. And overall, I would say there's still quite a bit of love, I would say, probably for the first few Nightmare on Elm Streets. Then there's stuff, like Scream, which actually, despite being in the 90s, is pretty well loved and makes fun sometimes of the horror movie genre. Then you got the stuff like them parodies of scary movies that I'd say probably a lot more hated today than it was 15, almost 20 years ago. Then you got some of the real horror movies, stuff like Paranormal Activity in the late 2000s. I'm not sure how much this would qualify as horror, probably is, but stuff like the Dawn of the Dead, well regarded. The comedy horror film with zombies, Shaun of the Dead. And there's probably tons of other movies that are probably on my mind that I can't think of. But I would say, going back to what I'm going to talk about a little bit, is the revived interest in horror movies. And what I mean by that is R-rated movies where it's filmic, it's not relying entirely on gore and violence, though it is needed at times for certain films. But people want to be genuinely scared, not this PG-13. Don't give me this childish crap. Let's have the real thing. That's what I think people want. And you see it with, so going back to Paranormal Activity, you got the Conjuring movies. And actually, I got a funny thing to talk about for a second. So, in June, I went and saw the movie Tag in the theater. And one of the trailers that they had for it was for The Nun, which is a continuation of the Conjuring movies. And the thing that happened was I think there was a part where in the trailer where the nun sneaks up on someone. There was a woman in the theater that got genuinely freaked out by that, even though it was just a trailer. And I believe with that trailer as well, it got pulled off YouTube because of how scary it was. Like, I'm not even kidding when I say that. Look it up. Look up YouTube pulls The Nun or something. I don't know. It has to be there. And then you got some of these other movies that have been out recently, like Split, what was that other one? Get Out, and a number of other movies that have been modest hits, but they're able to be filmed on cheap budgets, But I think with regards to Halloween, it's bringing things in full circle, considering that they have Laurie Strode back, once again, Jamie Lee Curtis playing that role again for the first time since probably, H2O, 20 years later. Now, to keep this in mind, I'm not a horror movie guy, but at least know of looking at how successful and how poorly a number of movies are for the most part. But for the most part, looking at the synopsis and the trailer for it, I mean, it seems like, it's like, as I said, bringing things in full circle. Laurie trying to save her family from Michael Myers and trying to do whatever is necessary to stop him. And to make sure no one in her family die. That's at least how I take a glance at it. So, with that in mind, I mean, it's probably that, and with trying to be more like probably what it seems like more like a film and not some popcorn flick that you just maybe watch once, forget about it, and probably won't see it until it's on TV. So, I mean, Halloween, it's still going to be dominating. And I'll tell you this, if last year's success with It was any indication that part 2 that they're going to have, I got a feeling It part 2 is going to be even bigger, much bigger than what the original did. I got a feeling it's going to be much more successful, and it's going to be tough to top. So anyway, that's all I have to say really with movies, and let's get into the video games. And Red Dead Redemption 2 has come out. I'm going to be willing to give it a chance and try it out. I already got the special edition at the time of this recording, which is November 1st. And I've always had a liking for Western type games, like Old West. Cowboys and all that, outlaws. And I actually liked the first Red Dead Redemption. I thought it was a pretty good game. And to me, I got pretty close to finishing it out. I think I probably still had a few handfuls of missions I had to beat. But for the most part, I liked it. I liked some of the mini games. It was just a lot of fun, and it definitely made me somewhat interested in the second one, which I didn't think they were going to make one, to be honest. I mean, I felt like something else was going to be made like another LA Noire or something else that wasn't like GTA. And personally, I think Max Payne is finished. I don't think a Bully 2 would be quite as successful, but regardless, I'm going to give this game a shot. I think I would definitely love it, but I have to play it and give it a shot. There's some other games that I'm definitely interested in as well, and one is a compilation one, a remastered compilation of Spyro Reignited Trilogy, which is the first 3 Spyro the Dragon games, which were originally on PlayStation. And I've been definitely interested since seeing the trailers for it, or the first teaser for it. I was actually waiting to get it for when it was going to come out in September, but to delay it. And I hope to God all of it's on the disc and not a download, because that would be really disappointing. I think I might wait and see on reviews and see if they said they are going to have it all three on disc, which was the case with Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, and I have to wait and see if they actually did do that. Otherwise, maybe I might not get it, because all three games should be playable on the disc no matter what. If they can do it with Crash, they can do it with Spyro. And the other game that interests me a little bit as well is Just Cause 4. Actually, I got another one as well, but that comes out around the same time as Just Cause 4, and that is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now, personally, in my opinion, I would have a Switch if I didn't have a number of games on PS4, PS3, 360, because I like that the Switch is starting to get titles that were on previous systems. I know it's not great choices overall, but I would definitely, if I didn't have like the 2016 Doom, Wolfenstein 2, LA Noire, Rayman Legends, and probably some other titles, South Park, and maybe one or two other titles, I would definitely get those on the Switch and get stuff like the Mario game, Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, the newest Zelda title. I would definitely, if I was getting into the Switch, I think Smash Brothers would be one of my first titles if I were to get one, because I've always liked the Smash Brothers games for the most part. Never liked Melee. Unfortunately, I never liked it. It goes way too fast for me. I've always liked the original on the Nintendo 64. I've always liked Brawl. I know it's not the most liked, but I've always had a soft spot for it. And playing it with 4 players, for any of them really, playing 4 players is an absolute blast. And I've only tried the Wii U version once. And playing it with 6 players altogether, hectic, but tons of fun. And I actually would like to try out Smash Brothers at some point, because Smash Brothers Ultimate, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to look like it'll be a huge blast to play with people if I were to get some people to play it, if I have a Switch. But overall, I mean, there's definitely titles for 2018 that I have huge interest in Spyro, Just Cause 4, and Smash Brothers. But with that being said, I'm going to end this episode here. This has been episode 3 of Geeks and Jocks. I am Ryan Sullivan. Episode 4 will be coming out around before or after Thanksgiving. And for that episode, it's going to be Console Buyer's Guide. A buying guide into the dead and new systems, current systems of 2018. What should you go after? Right, signing off. This has been Geeks and Jocks, episode 3.